Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists, Professor Bola TENURE, Director General, Bullitalk Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. Now let's start here in Nigeria, where the government has announced it is to spend about 10.6 trillion naira during the 2020 fiscal year. That estimate is a summary of the 2020 appropriation bill that was signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari. Speaking at the presidential villa, Abuja, at a short ceremony where his aides and some members of staff hosted him to a mini birthday party on the occasion of his 77th birthday anniversary, President Buhari said democracy was too slow for his liking, comparing the current anti-graft war to the one he prosecuted as military head of state between 1983 and 1985. He admitted that he had learned the hard way that the current democratic system is different from when he first came in 1983 as a military ruler. President Buhari recalled how he quickly jailed those who stole money from the country and returned the recovered funds to the respective states in good time, using the various committees he set up. Were two issues embedded in that introduction: the passing of the budget, and that has been praised. The fact that the president even used the occasion of his 77th birthday to sign the budget into law, it's also something that people have described as symbolic. But what it means, of course, is that we're now returning to the January to December cycle. And many have said this is a major achievement for the president, and also a demonstration, an illustration, a confirmation of good relations between the executive and the legislature, because this was something we did not see previously. Hitherto, you will have the executive and the legislature, quarreling over budget details. Even if some Nigerians have raised issues about this budget, the fact that it's a deficit budget, the fact that 24% of it will go for debt servicing, the fact that capital expenditure, as expected, is lower than recurrent expenditure, and then, of course, the fact that the National Assembly is proposing to spend 37 billion naira to renovate the National Assembly. But then, as an aside, some people will say, well, that's even the more important part of it. The president saying, look, this democracy is too slow for him, but that he will try his best to follow it and to respect it. Yemi, your president is saying that he will respect democracy, even if it is too slow.
He'll try. I think that, to be honest, and I think that for me will be the critical word that he says. I think in the spirit of the Sowore and the SSS crisis, after the Punch editorial, Business Day, the way they framed it was that he said he was a born-again Democrat, and they're going to hold him to that word. Now, 3 weeks later, coming back and saying it's too slow and that he will try also speaks to that challenge that we've seen not only in his words but also in his actions. Because it's the same gentleman that said at the NBA conference, I believe a year ago, that rule of law is subject to national security, which can be understood, but I think in the way that it's then being implemented, it seems to be a sort of a broader brush across the board. And the fact that the president hasn't spoken. And the flip side, I think, for me as well, is as military, you give orders and people follow. But as a Democrat, he's chosen to be a lot more silent. So he said, in one vein, he says it's too slow. In another vein, he's very silent on commenting on social issues, which is part of the request for him, or his commitment to the rule of law and the human rights of Nigerians.
Yes, Professor Ariole.
Well, democracy being too slow for his likeness is not expected from someone we have known before as a real hard military person, and who decided that, yes, this time around he's going to be Democrat. And at the second term, he's expressing what seemed to be in his mind, not expressed all along, which means he still remains a dictatorial president, you know. But my only worry is, you see, the military has a way of doing things, and sometimes people appreciate their way of doing things. No qualm about that. But what we are saying is that at least some style of the military in terms of executing what they plan to do and what they want to do to the benefit of majority should have been applied. If I had brought in such things into the Nigerian governance, in the democracy, in the democratic dispensation, it would have been seen as, yes, someone who had come to glorify and beautify military, even in the face of democracy. But up to today, we haven't seen that. Why I'm saying this is that when you set something in motion in terms of goal you want to achieve in the military, you go all possible ways from the rank and file to the up to make sure that it is done rightly. But I haven't seen him doing that. He only gives orders from the top, and we don't see how it starts from the bottom to get to where the result should be expected. I mean, well, that's the problem I'm having.
Well, but let's note that although the president says democracy is too slow, he has also assured us that he will follow it. And on the occasion of his 77th birthday, he also said that he's going to make sure that elections in 2023 are free, fair, and credible.
That's
and that nobody should use his name to do anything that is anti-democratic in that election. I think that's also, very good assurance.
But he won't be running. So the one they did.
Yes, but he will be presiding over the elections.
Yeah,
but even still, I think
he will be in charge of the government.
And that's fair. But I think more importantly is the one where you actually had, in a sense, skin in the game. And what has happened post the elections, February and March, and sort of lack of commentary. I mean, Yar'Adua will forever be remembered for stating that he understood that the elections that brought him into power were flawed, and setting up a process to actually review that. So for President Buhari or Major General Buhari to be waiting till 2023 to sort of, and also not forgetting that we have, what's it called, not supplementary elections in between, off-cycle elections.
Okay.
So why are you waiting till 2023 to say that you make sure elections are free and fair? Your party will contest next year. So why is that not a starting point to ensure that the errors committed during the elections this year don't repeat next year?
Well, we'll see what happens, because one of the major things the Senate wants to do in the new year is to send the, to wrap up the electoral amendment bill, and we would like to see how the president or the executive arm responds to that. But Prof, any comment on this, and particularly the budget for 2020 and the significance of what has happened so far?
On the first observation or submission of Mr. President, I think it's quite right if he says, democracy is too slow for his liking. It is normal. When he was military head of state, he was ruling on the basis of decrees. And
and everything was done with immediate effect.
Precisely. Military order. The military obeyed the last order without any complaint. But now, you don't give order like that in a democratic setting. So he must expect that things cannot quickly move the way he really wants it. The second point there is that if he says he will ensure free and fair elections, the implication of that one is that he is already admitting in his capacity as Mr. President that if the elections had not been free and fair, he was responsible. What is it that you are now going to do that will make the fundamental difference? So if already you say you will ensure that come 2023, elections will be free and fair, why was it that you were unable to ensure the freeness, of that particular election? Then on the budget, it gives me an impression that here in Nigeria, we are not able to govern Nigeria on the basis of conjectural methodology. that is looking deeply, far-sighted, looking at the future. For instance, what's the big deal with our return to a new cycle, January, December? It was January, December before, early 60s, 70s, for one reason or the other, especially at the tail end of the second National Development Plan. Now, we changed that to March, April, March. Now, we are going back. All the things that the colonial masters put in place, we try to change them, either because we are now an independentist country. Then when you look at the educational system too, it used to be January, December, not the university system. Okay. The university was the only one that was different. Now, we changed that only to revert it again. So I now ask myself, why is it that we are unable to really look critically at what is of national interest?
Well, let's hope that the budget will be given effect to, because the main problem with the budget is always implementation. It's always about getting enough revenue to be able to
One more
mobilize
point on the budget. You see,
make it effective.
The National Assembly increased the budget from 10.5 trillion to
from 10.4 to about 10.6, with a difference of about 264 billion.
Billion, precisely. Now, when we look at the factor of deficit budget, looking outwardly for revenue to come home to us for our development, I ask myself, what is the quantum, what is the amount of the budget that will now go to the projects that the National Assembly people have put in place? Are you sure that we are going to get funding internationally for this type of projects, especially
the president has submitted an external borrowing plan requesting to borrow 2.96 trillion naira or billion dollars.
Yes.
Okay.
$29.96 billion.
Yes, but the issue
to fund infrastructure projects.
The issue now is that in terms of per capita budgeting, in this case, the loan will certainly increase.
We're already spending 25%
precisely
of our budget on
to service. And you rightly pointed that one out in your earlier observation. So if we are committing a lot of money to service, our debts, and we are now incurring additional, I think that we should look at how Nigerians will live on the basis of that one.
That's a major problem.
It's very crucial, seriously.
Well, we'll see how that works out. I'm sure that the Economic Advisory Council will also take a look at this, because if you are spending 2.72 trillion naira just to service debt alone, and you have a deficit to GDP ratio of 1.52%. Now, let's just hope that all the other benchmarks of 305 naira to $1, 2.18
it's artificial creation.
million barrels per day. Let's hope that all of that, would work. Oil price benchmark of $57 and all of these variables. Should any of those variables go south, then of course we could have serious
perhaps more
problems.
importantly, by the time Olusegun Obasanjo left, our debt burden had been drastically reduced.
Yes.
Now, few years after.
Well, Prof, on that note, we'll have to take a short break now on ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akintarenwa, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Now, let's go to the United States, but a subject that also affects Nigeria. The United States has lifted Sudan from a blacklist for religious freedom violations. It, however, has bad news for Nigeria, Cuba, and Nicaragua, as these three countries have been issued stern warning. Sudan was the only nation removed from the State Department's annual list of countries of particular concern, while it announced Nigeria's inclusion by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The 2018 report of the United States Commission, a country of particular concern, as religious freedom trended negatively in the year. Meanwhile, 6 United States lawmakers have cautioned Nigeria's Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, over the continued detention of activist Omoyele Sowore. In a letter addressed to Malami, the lawmakers advised him against the disobedience of the rule of law under President Buhari's administration. They say Nigeria must learn to uphold basic human rights of its citizens, including their freedom of expression and political affiliation, without fear of government reprisal and harassment, particularly for opposing or dissenting voices. Now, 2 quick issues here. One is more straightforward than the other. Nigeria now a country of a particular concern in the eyes of the United States with regard to religious persecution and religious freedom. And then the second leg of it, 6 U.S. senators, including the Senate Minority Leader, writing to the Attorney General of the Federation of Nigeria to say, look, Nigeria has a responsibility to respect the rule of law and basic human freedoms. But, Prof, what does it mean to be designated a country of concern?
First of all, the word concern is normally used in diplomatic relations to show the crescendo of, non-acceptance of the situation. When in a non-verbal, it is said that, look, we are concerned. You are showing concern. That's to let you know that the relationship, the observation, the issue is getting worse and worse. First thing. Now, when you talk about Nigeria being listed in this category, it simply shows that sooner than later, if Nigerian government does not take a critical look at the problem, sanctionary measures may be in the offing. That is just the implication. Now, if you look at the contents of the letter sent to our Minister of Justice, who claims not to have seen it according to reports. Now, the issue is that the senators who have acted as individuals for now are actually acting in extension of the government of the United States. And by giving this, you use the word caution. Caution now is also warning. Caution means warning this time, to say, look, take this matter seriously. So for the government of Nigeria, the complaint from the US simply means that, look, the hitherto consideration that national security interests can override rule of law is not admissible to the people and government of the United States. That is the caution. So when the Americans are showing concern in this particular case, they are sending the message to the people of Nigeria to say, we will not condone this type of manner of political governance. It's as simple as that.
Well, Yemi.
Well, I mean...
The 2 issues. A country of concern with regard to religious freedom, and then the warning, the admonition from the 6 senators.
The country of concern is not unexpected, because it's been in the offing leading up to the elections, because it was a major issue following, especially given the crisis in the Middle Belt, where it seemed like Christians were being attacked, and also the burning of churches in different parts of the northern part of the country. So religious freedom, I think, at least from where I sit and what I understand, is Christians being persecuted for their faith, and that's the framing That's the framing they're in. And also, the
Particularly
backlash...
now that the Chief Justice of Nigeria has been quoted as saying that...
more Sharia should come into the... Yes, exactly.
But also
the Christian Association of Nigeria is kicking out, saying, look, why Sharia? Why not Christian education?
And why either one of them? It's a secular state. But also to be fair as well, Fulani, quote-unquote, herdsmen, which is a blanket term for anybody that could possibly be Hausa or Muslim or Fulani in certain parts of the country, who've also been attacked for perceived wrongs done. And the non-response of the state to educate fairly and ensure that the state speaks clearly that this is a secular state and both Christians and Muslims have a fair place. And I think that really is the issue, more so than the issues on the ground. But secondly, on the letter from the senators, I think it's quite apt. But for me, I think it also speaks to what is not maybe necessarily happening diplomatically. Because to Prof's point, if Major General Buhari is saying the rule of law is subject to national security, which in some contexts could really be understood, depending on what we're talking about, one would expect that there will be some diplomatic conversation around these are the facts of the matter that we might not necessarily be able to come to the public with to engage around why this is the case. But the fact of the matter, as everybody can see, is that Yele was granted bail twice. He has now been rearrested. It was 2 weeks on Friday. The 14-day ultimatum given by civil society organizations expire tomorrow. So the letter is, I think, highly commendable and constant warning again to the Buhari administration that this is not just Nigerians that are affected, nor paying attention, but the international communities as well. And since he says he's trying to be a Democrat, we expect Major General Buhari to...
No, but Yemi, your point that protection of national security interests can be understood in some contexts. No. Even within the framework of international humanitarian law, all right, national security, self-security will still
be within the
framework of rule of law.
Exactly.
So, for instance, it is clearly stated, all the Geneva Conventions are clear on this. For instance, you cannot attack your non-combatants, people who are not armed. All right. If, for instance, Prof,
what I was trying to say, for example, there's a process, if for the sake of argument, you get a tip that somebody wants to do something, bomb up a building or whatever, the process that you might be required to go and get a police warrant and go and arrest the person, and that is what I'm trying to say.
Okay,
so you might
that
not
will
follow,
fall within the framework of legitimate self-defense.
Exactly.
But okay, at this point, let me have Professor Ariole's thoughts.
No, you see, I think people who are outside Nigeria, even diaspora Nigerians, they could also be worried. In this situation now, we have the president, the Senate president, and the CJN being of the same religion. You know, and it says something that they ought to be in position to save the other people who are not in their religion. But it seems it's not the case. We now hear also from the president saying, the common law does no more work in Nigeria. You will be caught, then you will come and prove to the law that you are not guilty. That's the reverse. That's what we see.
That's the French system.
That's the French system. It's the reverse. But even
that's the one he knows.
Yeah, but that's what the president said exactly. And I'm worried because even within the French system, before ever they get you to come and prove that you are not the person who committed whatever it is, they would have made investigation. They would have carried investigation before they bring you to prosecutorial level. But here now our president is saying it openly, that you will be caught and then you come and prove whether you are wrong or not. And that's
which is not our law. Which is
not our law. And that's the president that is sitting to execute our law. And the CJN who is asking now that Sharia should be, there will be more content of Sharia in our constitution than it has ever been. And then we have the Senate president who is sitting over making law, which means indirectly he should be asked to really push more Sharia into our system. So these are issues people outside will be looking at and say, wow, Nigeria is turning something else. We must intervene. And the lobby group of Nigerians, whether we know them or we don't know them, they exist. They will be lobbying and asking the yes,
yes.
Congress people say, look,
Yes,
do something.
to sanction
Indeed, some
Nigeria.
elders from the Middle Belt
Exactly.
wrote to the British Parliament
You see, that's what I'm saying.
to complain about
There will
religious
be-
freedom in
They
Nigeria.
will be lobbying, and the moment the evidences are very clear, and now that it's clearing that both the president, the CJN, and the Senate president are all, they are involved in creating religious disharmony in the system, they have to do something. Red alert is put in its place. You know, something like that, you know.
Well, but let's just hope, you know, that the Nigerian government and the Attorney General will take these interventions in good faith. Because the common response is to say, look, these people, they should keep quiet. It's none of their business. As one presidential spokesman did the other day, you know, saying that Nigeria is a sovereign state and the UK, the US, they have enough problems of their own. They should worry about their own problems and leave Nigeria alone.
International relations as at today governed by the principle of interdependence. Multilateralism is one of the major pillars, all right, of global governance.
Exactly.
So Nigeria cannot, under whatever context, be an island on itself.
Well, I hope that those who should know that, I hope they will accept it.
No, but I mean, as I said last week, it's also just hypocrisy. When the international community commend what you're doing, or their words favor what you're doing, you make it front page headlines. But when they're critical, then you tell them to mind their business.
Yeah,
I mean, the hypocrisy of that is
yes.
it's glaring enough to make the words quite weightless.
Anyway, we just have to be careful about this allegation of religious persecution because religious conflicts have never helped Nigeria at any
all.
time.
At all.
Religious
At all.
tension
Yes.
has never helped any country anywhere in the world.
Indeed.
And then, of course, fundamental human rights are fully enshrined in Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution. Well, we'll take a short break now, another short break. When we return, the conversation will continue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akinterenwa, Director General, Bulitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Now, we're back again to the subject of concern to Nigerians. But, you know, how you respond to it depends on what you want for Nigeria. Nigeria's current constitution, which came into effect in 1999, with a view to reviewing the tenures of the president and state governors from the extant 2 terms of 4 years each to a single 6-year tenure, has been debated on the floor of the House of Representatives. The House summarily threw out the bill, sponsored by John Diye, an All Progressives Congress member from Benue State. The bill also sought to amend the tenure of lawmakers in the National Assembly and state legislatures from the initial 4-year period to 6 years. Diye's colleagues stiffly resisted the bill during its consideration for second reading at the resumption of plenary. However, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has faulted the decision of the lawmakers, describing the rejection of the bill as a missed opportunity. Atiku expressed optimism that a 6-year single term will address the desperation by incumbents to remain in office and enable them to concentrate on the job. Well, Professor Ariole, I would like to start with you, and this is not new. I mean, this same idea was in the public domain during President Jonathan's term in office. And President Jonathan had proposed, like Honorable John Diye has done now, that it's better to have a single 6-year tenure. But in President Jonathan's case, he was proposing that for governors and presidents, while persons in the legislature could stay for as long as their people, would like to elect them and have them represent their interests. But this time around, John Diye, bringing it back, was saying that, look, 6-year tenure, you do 6 years, you go. Other people will come. But during the second reading, his colleagues, all the lawmakers who contributed to the debate, they opposed it, and that was the end of that bill. But they may have shut it down, but the idea is in the public domain. What do you think?
I think it will still come out one day because, you see, places like Switzerland, where they don't even know their president, It's just one year. The president comes and goes, and it rotates that way. So I don't know. I don't know why Nigerians are afraid of having one-term presidency. It's still a sectional issue because some section will tell you, see, we don't have enough people to be rotating.
But Prof, if you work in government for even just 2 years, you won't want to go back.
No, see, seriously.
You would like to stay?
In the academics, we had such before, where we had for 4-year vice chancellorship. We still agree that 5 years is sufficient, and then the person goes, another person comes in. If it is allowed in the academics, where we know one term, and you have come to do work, and the work will be visibly seen. It's not a hidden something. And people still accept that one term is okay, go. Why shouldn't it be for the politicians also? Why should their own be different? I expect it to be passed, and somebody should keep on insisting that one single term is sufficient for any president that wants to do something and want to prove that his own section of the country is really has done something for Nigeria. Because based on his performance, that particular section will be seen as a worthy section of leadership in Nigeria. On
comparative basis.
Yes, on comparative basis. We need that. And so coming second term and having people killed during electoral processes is not helping Nigeria. Just Kogi State, we have how many people died just for a state? Not to talk of a whole Nigeria. More people will die. Youth corpers have been dying because of Nigerian election. How I wish somebody will keep on insisting that that 6-year term must be thrown back to the Senate and the National Assembly for more debate.
Yeah, I mean, you agree that a single 6-year term in office would, enhance focus, productivity, deepen rotation and representation, and also perhaps, help to eliminate the second-term syndrome that we have seen as a source of big problem in Nigeria's democracy.
I think so, and I think to the point you made, John Deere's mistake, I would say, was saying that it should apply to the legislature as well. I don't think that rationale works for the legislature because there's quite a steep learning curve. And if your constituents think you represent them well, I mean, they're lawmakers, and I think maybe the balance of that is to reduce their perks in office. So you can come back as often as you want, but it's not your bread and butter, so to speak, as it currently is, which is why we're spending 37 billion to renovate a building that was renovated under President Jonathan's administration. But putting that aside, I think that's where the problem was. And I'm not sure that the debate was around the presidency, the single-year tenure.
I think it was more joined now.
No, not even that. I think it was more about their own personal interest.
Okay.
was why they threw out the baby with the bathwater. So if it comes back, as you said, and it doesn't include the legislature, I believe that it's a greater chance.
Yeah,
but I think it also puts to rest the murmurs of a possible third-term agenda, because the framing for that was that a single 6-year term will be passed, and if that is then the case, Major General Buhari would still be eligible to run. Because
no, it will not, because the law cannot have retroactive effect. It's a notorious principle. It's a trite principle of law.
What do you mean?
No, the law can only begin to take effect from the point from which it is enacted into law. You cannot benefit from a law, that was made after you had already been elected.
No, so
you can only function under the Constitution that brought you to power.
So, which is 2 terms. So if you now amend the Constitution while it's in my second term, that now says a president can run for 1 year, 6 terms. Why would that
it will not apply to the incumbent, because the law can, it will be, you'll be making it take retroactive effect. No, this is not Zimbabwe or Uganda.
That's why.
The Uganda president.
Hold on, that's why I was pushing.
Where will you be if they try to do that?
Exactly. I was pushing you.
Enough is enough.
At 70 plus, we'll be on the streets.
Dr. Abati, I was pushing you to that point, which is why I said it will put a rest to the murmurs of that, because that's the way it was being framed. So even without the legal part of it, just the fact that it's not even on the table, hopefully, will put people at rest. Now you've layered it with the legal terminology, because people, when court orders are not obeyed, you can think anything can happen. So we might become some of our fellow African countries in the way we interpret these things.
Well, Prof, is it right to speculate in that direction?
There's nothing wrong with speculation.
Thank you.
That's why I was talking about conjectural methodology.
Thank you, sir.
You live in the future, anticipate that one. You see, the malaise, the problem, the disease, the challenge the people of Nigeria are faced with is that we have politicians that put selfish interest before national interest. The situation in Nigeria, the political situation in Nigeria is such that this type of John Deere's suggestion to have been, specially commended 6-year term. What is it that you want to do that you are unable to do? Do your best within 6 years.
I wonder.
It's impossible. Look, in France, they used to have until the year 2000 7-year tenure.
Exactly.
7-year tenure. So when it was eventually reduced to 5-year tenure,
Sarkozy.
Yes, started with Sarkozy.
Nicolas Sarkozy.
Yes. Now you discover that the thinking of the French people by that time is that, look, if you cannot do your best in the first term, second term, what is it that you are going to add? Valéry Giscard d'Estaing did 3 times. François Mitterrand, 2. 14 years.
Times.
So when you look at the case of Nigeria as it is, I think that our politicians, as they are, they need to learn from the American experience through this Donald Trump's impeachment. What is it? The Congress people, particularly the Republicans, they think that, yes, they are senators, they are congressmen, they represent the people, and they think that they can think rightly on behalf of the people. They maintain a position. But now, you can now see that the American people are now following the logic of impeachment. So the Nigerian legislators, as they are, they might have been elected, but it doesn't mean that at their level, they're representing the thinking
Of Nigerians.
Of Nigerians. The Nigerians will certainly sanction them very well if they do not continue to protect objectively the interests of the people.
Well, good point. But let's now go to Donald Trump, whom you just mentioned about his impeachment. And in Washington, D.C., in the United States, Donald Trump has become only the 3rd president in the United States to be impeached by the House of Representatives, bringing him a step closer to being removed from office. 2 articles of impeachment were passed over his behavior in the Ukrainian scandal, one for abuse of power and the other for obstruction of justice. Not a single Republican voted for either articles, a fact the White House seized on to portray the Democrats' impeachment drive as motivated by political bias. The issue will now pass to the Senate, the other body that makes up the U.S. Congress, which will hold a trial on whether to convict and remove Mr. Trump or not from office next month. So, Prof, you already broached this subject, and now it's been properly introduced. The House voted to impeach President Trump, and he's the 3rd president after Andrew Johnson, 1898, Bill Clinton, 1998, and now President Donald Trump. And in his own case, the House under Article Resolution 775 is accusing him of high crimes and misdemeanor against the rule of law in the United States, against the U.S. Constitution, and against American democracy. It was well debated. We saw democracy on display, but now it goes to the Senate. The concern is that it may not be removed because the Republicans have the majority. I think we should just first take another break. Then when we come back, we will then reflect on this and examine it further. It's time now for a short break again here on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. When we return, we'll be discussing the subject of President Donald Trump's impeachment in the United States. Don't go away.
The question is on the adoption of Article 2. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Present is 1. Article 1 is adopted. The question is on adoption of.
Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bulitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Victor Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Now, before we went on break, I introduced the subject of President Donald Trump's impeachment. He has issued a statement both before the impeachment and after to accuse, naturally, expectedly, the Democrats led by Nancy Pelosi in the House of Reps of witch hunt, of this witch hunt even being worse than the Salem witch trials. You know, Republicans contributing to the debate have said this is worse than the crucifixion of Christ. That even Pontius Pilate was more, was a better judge than the Democrats sitting in judgment over Trump. But Yemi, what do you think? Prof was on the morning show during the week, and he had ample time analyzing the development. But I would like to hear your own views.
But I think for me, it's really just quite simple. As in your lead-up, and you said American democracy in view, and I think that's what it represents. Like it or not, Democrats are of a certain belief of what the American Constitution represents, what the office of the President of the United States represents. The Republicans seem to be more aligned, party-wise, and really, I would say, on sort of the substance, the meat of the matter. What is the issue at stake? The Constitution, America's democracy, as opposed to playing as party men. And I think that's it's an important way to look at it, especially in the context of Nigeria, where we joke that APC and PDP are two major parties, two sides of the same coin. So we really don't have the benefit of debate of what does Nigeria mean to an APC person, or what policies should that be. Even though, yeah, the APC will say they're a bit to the left and PDP to the right, but the way their members cross carpets freely.
Well, though one Democrat has already crossed carpet in this matter, as the congressman from New Jersey constituency,
two of them
Jeff Van Drew.
Yeah, two of them. But two is within the numbers is minor. I mean, we have like 10, 20, 30. It's like a whole. We have a whole rally to welcome people to the other side. So I think, I don't know much about their backgrounds, and I think their backgrounds might speak a bit to why.
In Drew's case, it's from a Republican constituency. That constituency has been Republican for 55 years.
There you go.
And he just got there by accident, it seems.
Fantastic. Now, that then goes back to my point about Senate, because what I would have loved to see is even Republican senators, depending on what if their constituencies agree or not. I mean, I'm sure the Democrats in those constituencies, and what kind of dynamic in terms of engagement or campaigns they ran to see that their senator represented what their opinion was. We'll get there. For the National Assembly locally, I'm particularly excited that people have started calling. This is very different from 4 years ago, I would say 8 years ago, where citizens are picking up the phone to call their legislators and asking them questions, asking them, if you take the social media bill, asking them what is your stance on this matter. So as our own democracy evolves, even with a major general that's trying to obey the rule of law, but our democracy is evolving into a place where citizens understand the role that they play, and that's a plus.
And of course, we need civic engagement. Prof, what's your take on Donald Trump?
Well, if I should start from where he started as candidate of the Republicans, and he claimed he has come to reclaim America for the Americans.
To make America great again.
Okay, whatever. And my own interest is reclaiming America for the Americans. Yes, beyond making America great again, you see, which means as a free world leader, he's not very interested in being a free world.
In the rest of the world.
Yeah, so this is the issue. Now, he's claiming that he has done nothing wrong. He was only acting in good faith for the American interests. Whatever he did in Ukraine and whatever he did in trying to disobey what the Democrats claim is against the American Constitution, and he expects to be allowed to defend himself. Unfortunately, he was not able to appear in the House of Reps to defend.
He was given the opportunity.
Yes, but he never appeared. And here come again, in Senate, he will never appear because he's not allowed to appear for failing to come in the House of Reps. So I wouldn't know. It means that people in the Senate are already biased in terms of what the Democrats have done, that is to favor Trump. Is expected. And he is now demanding Nancy to send it in quickly to Senate so that it will be decided. And Nancy has decided to keep it to herself. You know, it's also democracy in America playing, you know. And we know that popular vote, Trump did not win. We know, everybody knows that. Which means it's still a sectional issue, and those who really believe.
But the Democrats won.
Yes.
So if you frame it that way, that the Democrats...
Well, I wouldn't say Democrats.
No, the popular vote was
yes,
the Democratic win.
Yes, the popular vote.
Yeah,
now,
that's my point.
No, the Americans use a different system.
Yeah, they use a different system. It's a college that he won, and colleges still stand. That's what you're going to find in the Senate. And of course, they will exculpate him.
You need 67%, two-thirds of the numbers to be able to impeach the president.
Yeah, I was even told that
remove the
51
president.
of...
No, 53. The Republicans have 53 seats. So you will need 20 of them, you know, to
be able to.
for you to be able to remove the...
And we have 2 Democrats only. So that's a taste of things to come.
Anyway, let's go to the UK, where... Oh, Prof, you still want to comment on this subject?
Yes.
You spent almost half of the time on the morning show the other day.
One side. Conviction, removal, other side.
Okay.
Now, you see, let me just make the point that Donald Trump was impeached because of his braggadocio. He doesn't want to...
On that point, we'll go to the United Kingdom, where Brexit moves a step closer to reality, as the United Kingdom Parliament approves a bill to leave the European Union at the end of next month. The measure passed by 124 votes, even gaining support from 6 opposition Labour lawmakers who defied party orders to vote against the withdrawal agreement. It marks the first major legislative victory from Prime Minister Boris Johnson after he suffered a string of bruising parliamentary defeats before last week's election returned his Conservative majority with a thumping majority. Speaking ahead of the vote, the Prime Minister stressed that passage could help heal a divided nation. Now, Professor Akintere, and I'll come to you. This is a fresh subject, Brexit. Now, the Tories, they have a majority of 80. It looks like Boris Johnson, whatever he wants from the House of Commons, he will get it this time around. Much luckier than Theresa May before him. What's your take?
Yes, I've always made the point that we need to differentiate between the interest of parliamentarians and the interest of the general people of United Kingdom. I refer to the fact that 2 years only after the British decided to join the then European Economic Community, they had problems already with the regional organization, to the extent that they organized a referendum. But narrowly, the majority had it that, look, they should continue. But 2016 again, referendum was renewed. And they said they want to opt out. But at the end of the day, the National Assembly just said, no, the parliament in the UK.
The Commoners.
Yes, so I think that Boris Johnson now is standing and protecting the interests of the British people, and Brexit, sooner than later, will be a fait accompli.
Well, yes, but there will also still be details to work out, including the trade deal with the European Union,
and the backside also.
You know, Boris Johnson is promising will be done very quickly, expeditiously. But whether that will happen or not remains to be seen. Professor Ariola, yes.
Well, I expected what Johnson wanted to happen all along, you know, because this has been, according to them, they were part of the Margaret Thatcher's caucus and group that wanted Britain to...
The sons of Margaret Thatcher back in power.
I've really been expecting that. But you see, the issue that people are saying is that whatever he gets, it's going to exclude Scotland or another Northern Ireland. So these are issues. The majority is there, I agree, but how is he going to take into consideration Northern Ireland and Scotland in the British or the United Kingdom?
An independent monitoring authority has been set up. It's provided for in his agenda.
Well, on that note, we'll have to call it a day again on this episode of This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. See you next week.